Hey guys, so today we'll be learning about three forms of validation. Forms of validation are used in forms, of course. For example, passport forms and birth forms and other type of documents that we need our users to enter information into. And what form validation does is that it actually verifies that our user has entered information into the text field and that it's actually what we're asking them for. So it's not some type of gibberish. Like if we write a prompt, it'll pop up in the window, and then the user can type in gibberish. Right now we're actually asking them for something specific. So we're going to be going through three forms of form validation: text fields first, and then we'll do drop downs, and then we'll do radio buttons. So starting off, the form of validation of text fields, it looks something like this, like right here. You need first to create the form and create a submit so that it actually creates a form where the user can submit information. And now, as you can see on this one, what we're asking it, we're going to have a return. I'll show you guys in a little bit the return. And what we're checking for right now is for the user's birthday. So then we ask them, please enter your birthday. And then we have different types of inputs so that we can, in our form, so that we can ask the user for their birth date, as you can see here. And then we have an input that's the submit, so that the form is submitted. So when we do this, we'll need a function to check for their birth date. So this is what the function looks like right here. By doing this, we will code so that the computer will have an if statement. So our if statement will create a condition that's going to help us get the information from the user and make sure it's what we want. Here in the if statement, we're asking the document to get the element birthdate field. It's going there because that's where we want it to go. And we're saying if the length of the birthdate field equals 0, which would be nothing, which is not what we want because we want their birthdate, then we are saying that we're asking the user to please enter their birthday. And then what we're doing is that, let's skip over here, we have a return with a boolean. We know all about our booleans, false and true. This return will bring him back up and let the form know that what we were asking for is not being actually done. So that's what that would do. And then now, if we want to focus our user's mouse into the area where we're asking them to submit the information that they have not, then we have this little nifty thing right here that's a focus that sends their cursor to where we want them to submit the information. So this is what it technically looks like. Now it gets a little bit hectic when we want to write document.getElement by ID blah 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 blah. So why don't we go ahead and make that a variable, because we know all about our variables, and make it something shorter like target field. So we did that, and now what we can do is that we can replace document.getElement blah 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 by target field, so that our code looks a little bit more compact. And then we do the changing, and it's still the same thing as up here. You can do it either way. I recommend the variables because it's shorter to type, but it's up to you. Now we can also do another thing when asking the user to enter their birth date. What we can do is that we can highlight the space where we want them to submit the information, and it's right here. As you can see, what we would be doing, the function is the same, but we would be adding this field right here. That's just target field dot style dot background equals red, which is the color that we want it to be if the user hasn't submitted the information that we want them to. This is basically like a fill, but we would do style dot background for this. And if our user has submitted the information, then the style background should go back to white. which is great because that means that they've given us the information that we want. So that's form validation text fields in a nutshell. So we'll be moving now to drop downs. So this is what the drop down looks like. It's the same thing, form on submit, return. This time we're checking for a selection because it's a drop down and the user is actually clicking on something and not texting on a field. Our selection, as you remember, making drop downs from the color palette, you need to select an ID and then you got your option values, etc. For this case I chose to do dogs because who doesn't like dogs? And we have an option value, it's selected, and then I give the options of dogs. You do option value, and then I enter German Shepherd because I love German Shepherds. You can add as many as you want of these. I just decided to do one for the sake of the tutorial. And then we do input type and submit because we want to submit this form. Same thing as we did up with the text fields, we want to check for the selection, so we'll do our if statements, get our document elements, and select index is the spot that has been selected. So if the index equals 0, then oops, sorry about that. So if the index equals 0, we know that we have nothing, which is not what we want. We want them to please select the dog, so we ask them to. And the return is false, which lets our form submit that what we want hasn't been done. As we did upstairs on the other section, we can make our variable, our document get element by ID, a variable, which in this case is target because it's easier, and we can change the same thing, and that's how we do it for our drop downs. Now moving on to the last one, it's radio buttons. Now radio buttons are the same thing. We want a form, so we create a form, of course, and we would like to submit validate radius. That's what this one's called. So the other one was called check for selection. The other one's check for birth date. Now for radio buttons, it's validate radius. So to create the radius, this is the form that you would do it. So you input a type and then it's a radio. Keep in mind that the name is always R1, and I'll let you know in a second why. It's always R1, and then you give it a value and then you insert the text that you want for your value. Again, you can have as many of these ones as you want. I just decided to do to show the differences. And then you have a submit form. Great. Now what this does is the function validate radius. So I created var radius for the document get element ID. As you saw up in the other ones, it's easier if you create a variable than writing the whole thing again and again and again. Now on this one, we're creating a for loop, and we're setting our variable I here, because you know if you set the variable I equals 0, then it goes through, and then it does this as long as it's less than the amount of radius that we have, and then we always add another. We add 1 when the for loop happens again. So that's what it has to do it, because it's a list, so it has to go through it and check for what we're looking for, which is our radius. And then as you can see here, we created if radius I, which can be any number less than our radial length, is checked, then you return true. Checked as being as has a check mark, then return being true. If this is not true and the user hasn't checked anything, sun or moon, then we ask them to please check one, and it returns false to our form on submit. Now we did R1 because when the loop goes through, it checks if any buttons are selected, and if they're not, then it returns R2, which we know is nothing. So we don't want R2. So that's what why that happens. And that, guys, is pretty much everything about form of validations. If you have any questions, please ask me, and go ahead and do the exercises. You're gonna ace this. Thanks for watching.